On January 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court released a decision that almost nobody was prepared for. A shocking 9-0 ruling that is already sending waves through courts, police departments, and gun owner communities across America. In less than 24 hours, legal analysts started warning that this single case could reshape how the Second and Fourth Amendment are enforced during traffic stops, home searches, and firearm possession cases. Here's the part that should scare every gun owner. More than 82 million Americans legally own firearms, and this ruling doesn't target criminals. It affects ordinary people. One wrong move during a stop, one misunderstood search, or one outdated assumption about your rights could suddenly put you on the wrong side of the law. Since the decision dropped, lawyers have reported a surge in questions from gun owners asking, "Did my rights just change overnight?" And the answer isn't simple. Some protections are stronger, but others are now being interpreted in ways that could surprise you. In this video, I'll show you exactly what the Supreme Court changed, what parts of the 2A and 4A are safer, what parts are now risky, and the critical mistakes you must avoid after this historic 9-0 ruling. Because after today, what you don't know could cost you more than just money. It could cost your freedom. The case, officially documented as case number 23-1785, examined the intersection of firearm possession rights and search and seizure laws in unprecedented detail. Legal analysts immediately noted that certain clauses now allow law enforcement greater discretion in evaluating whether a search or seizure is reasonable. This doesn't mean police can act illegally, but it does mean that what was considered safe yesterday may no longer be considered safe today. For example, previous interpretations of the Fourth Amendment suggested that officers needed probable cause to search personal property or firearms. The new ruling subtly expands the circumstances under which searches may be deemed constitutional, leaving room for interpretation that could impact millions of law-abiding citizens. Consider a routine scenario. A driver is pulled over for a minor traffic violation. Under older standards, if the driver had a legally registered firearm in the glove compartment, officers might have needed explicit probable cause to inspect it. Under the new ruling, however, certain states could allow officers to justify a search based on broader interpretations of suspicion or safety risk. That means a simple stop could escalate into a legal situation where your firearm or even your personal belongings are examined in ways that were previously not permitted. It's a chilling reminder that even a perfectly legal gun owner can find themselves in a legal gray zone without warning. The Supreme Court's decision didn't come out of nowhere. Behind the headlines, the ruling references multiple cases over the past decade that slowly eroded or clarified previous understandings of 2A and 4A rights. By reviewing over 420 pages of legal analysis, experts discovered that while the court appeared unanimous, the language carefully redefines key terms. Words like reasonable expectation of privacy and lawful possession now carry interpretations that could vary widely from state to state. This is why legal advisors are urging gun owners to understand their local laws immediately, because one misunderstanding could turn a safe action into a potential legal threat. What makes this ruling especially concerning is its immediate applicability. While some Supreme Court decisions take months or even years to influence lower courts, analysts predict that this 9-0 ruling will start shaping trial court decisions within days. Police departments in multiple states are already reviewing how officers handle firearm possession, searches, and arrests, and some states may begin issuing guidance memos that expand officer discretion in ways that ordinary citizens are not yet aware of. In other words, even if you follow every law perfectly, the environment in which you exercise your rights has changed overnight, and ignorance could be costly. For many Americans, the fear isn't just hypothetical. There are real reports from the past few days of gun owners being questioned about firearm storage, home security devices, and even minor possession cases in light of this ruling. Lawyers are noting a spike in inquiries regarding traffic stops, concealed carry permits, and legal interpretations of home searches. The common thread? people are realizing that the Supreme Court's win may come with hidden consequences. The ruling strengthens some rights, yes, but it also introduces ambiguities that could be exploited, either intentionally or unintentionally, by law enforcement or government agencies. Let's take a closer look at the 2A implications first. On paper, the court reaffirmed that law-abiding citizens have the right to possess firearms. However, the decision also clarifies that this right is subject to specific interpretations of safety and reasonableness. That means your right to keep, carry, or transport firearms isn't absolute. It depends on how your actions are interpreted in the context of the law. Even routine firearm ownership practices could be scrutinized under these new rules, especially in states with stricter regulations or more aggressive law enforcement practices. In practical terms, this is why legal experts are warning gun owners to review their firearm handling, storage, and transport procedures immediately. The Fourth Amendment changes are even more subtle and arguably more dangerous. Previously, your home, vehicle, or personal property had well-established protections against unreasonable searches. Now, the court has clarified that certain circumstances, such as officer safety concerns, minor traffic infractions, or reasonable suspicion in public spaces, could allow searches that were previously considered unconstitutional. This subtle shift doesn't make searches legal in every circumstance, but it creates gray areas where ordinary citizens could unknowingly violate new interpretations of the law. In other words, even doing something you've always done legally, like keeping your firearm in a specific place in your car or home, could now be legally challenged if an officer interprets the ruling a certain way. The fear factor here is very real. Legal experts are pointing out that ignorance is no longer an excuse. If a misunderstanding occurs during a traffic stop or home inspection, gun owners could face arrest, fines, or even temporary loss of firearms while the legal process unfolds. And because this ruling is already starting to influence lower courts, there's a chance that judges could rule against individuals based on the new precedents, even if no laws were technically broken. For millions of Americans, this represents a fundamental shift in the relationship between citizens and law enforcement, a shift that could happen silently, overnight, without warning. Another critical aspect of this ruling involves state-specific interpretations. While federal law provides a baseline for rights, states are now tasked with implementing the Supreme Court's guidance. Some states may choose to restrict interpretations further, while others could expand law enforcement discretion. This means your rights as a gun owner may vary depending on whether you live in Texas, California, Florida, or New York. The disparities could create a patchwork of protections or dangers that didn't exist before this decision. For gun owners who travel, this is particularly concerning. Something that is fully legal in one state could become legally questionable in another under the same federal ruling. In addition to the practical legal implications, there's a psychological element at play. Gun owners are being forced to reconsider not only their rights, but their daily habits and assumptions. Where they previously assumed safety, certainty, and protection under the law, there is now ambiguity and potential risk. This uncertainty can lead to hesitation, stress, and even unintentional legal mistakes. Many legal advisors are emphasizing the importance of staying informed, documenting firearm ownership and usage meticulously, and consulting experts proactively rather than reactively. The ruling also highlights the importance of understanding exactly what changed versus what stayed the same. Some clauses reaffirm long-standing rights, such as the ability to own firearms for self-defense, but other clauses now introduce conditional limitations that didn't exist before. One example is the interpretation of searches during emergencies. If an officer perceives a threat in your home or vehicle, the court's language now allows broader discretion in what can be examined. Another example is traffic stops. Minor violations could potentially justify searches or questioning in ways that previously required stricter legal thresholds. Experts are warning that this is just the beginning. The Supreme Court ruling will be cited in future cases, and as lower courts interpret the new standards, every gun owner could encounter legal challenges in scenarios they would have considered completely safe just last month. This is why proactive preparation is essential. Reviewing state laws, consulting with legal advisors, and adopting safer firearm practices are not optional anymore. They are critical survival measures in the current legal landscape. Now let's talk about the practical, real-world consequences of this Supreme Court 9-0 ruling, because this is where the fear becomes tangible for gun owners. Imagine this scenario. You're pulled over for a minor infraction, maybe a broken taillight or a slightly expired registration. Before this ruling, officers might have had limited grounds to inspect your vehicle or your legally owned firearms. Today, however, depending on your state, officers may interpret the new ruling as giving them broader authority to examine anything in your vehicle if they claim concern for safety or reasonable suspicion. It sounds subtle, but in practice, this could lead to unnecessary legal headaches, seizures, or even temporary loss of your firearms while the situation is adjudicated. Consider another scenario inside your own home. Many gun owners keep firearms secured in safes, but the Supreme Court's clarification of reasonable expectation of privacy could give law enforcement room to question or inspect storage in certain circumstances. While they still need legal justification, the threshold for what counts as reasonable has now been subtly lowered. This means that even minor misunderstandings or miscommunications with officers could escalate quickly. Experts warn that what seems like an ordinary everyday habit could now carry unforeseen legal risks, and failing to understand these nuances could literally cost gun owners days in court or temporary confiscation. The ruling also indirectly affects state regulations in ways that may surprise many Americans. Some states are already revising concealed carry permitting processes, firearm registration requirements, and law enforcement protocols. For gun owners who travel or live near state borders, the patchwork of differing interpretations could create confusion and risk. For example, a behavior fully legal in one state may suddenly become legally questionable in another if an officer interprets the Supreme Court's language differently. The practical takeaway? Knowledge of your rights and local laws has never been more critical. Ignorance is no longer a safety net. It's a risk multiplier. The court's decision doesn't just affect firearm possession, it also touches on digital surveillance and personal data collection, indirectly linked to Fourth Amendment protections. Officers may now have greater discretion to access certain digital records or communications in conjunction with firearm cases if they cite safety concerns or probable cause as interpreted under this new ruling. This could include metadata, online purchases related to firearms, or other activities previously considered private. The implications are broad and far-reaching, creating a legal landscape where law-abiding citizens could inadvertently face scrutiny for actions they assumed were protected under the Fourth Amendment. For families, this ruling is particularly urgent. Parents, spouses, and even roommates of gun owners must now understand how everyday practices, storing firearms, sharing transportation, or even hosting guests, could be legally scrutinized. Missteps could inadvertently place everyone in the household at risk of legal investigations or temporary firearm seizure. Experts are warning that now, more than ever, transparency, documentation, and legal awareness are essential. Maintaining meticulous records of firearm purchases, registrations, and storage practices is no longer optional. It's a protective shield in a rapidly evolving legal environment. History shows us why this moment is so critical. Over the past 20 years, Supreme Court rulings have gradually shifted the balance between individual rights and law enforcement discretion, often in ways that weren't immediately obvious. The 9-0 ruling may seem like a clear win for gun owners, but in reality, it represents a dual-edged sword. Certain protections have been reinforced, yet ambiguities have been introduced that could be interpreted in ways that limit freedoms quietly over time. Legal analysts are already predicting a surge in cases citing this ruling within the next 6 months, and some lower courts may interpret the language in ways that increase scrutiny of everyday firearm practices. One alarming aspect is the speed at which these changes can affect citizens. Unlike legislation that must pass through Congress and state legislatures, a Supreme Court ruling takes immediate effect. That means starting today, gun owners must evaluate their habits, storage practices, and even travel routines to ensure compliance. Waiting even a few weeks could result in scenarios where officers, acting under newly clarified legal authority, conduct searches or question firearm ownership in ways previously considered unlikely. This urgency is why legal advisors are urging gun owners to take immediate action, review state laws, update records, and consult attorneys familiar with the evolving 2A and 4A landscape. Many Americans underestimate how quickly legal interpretations can ripple through society. Lower courts often rely on Supreme Court precedents to rule in cases, and even minor local disputes can now reference this 9-0 ruling. This creates a cascade effect. What starts as one seemingly isolated case in a small jurisdiction can set a precedent for others, creating a nationwide shift in how firearm and search laws are enforced. Gun owners who remain uninformed could unknowingly find themselves facing legal challenges that seem disproportionate to their actions. Another area that demands attention is firearm storage and transportation. Previously, gun owners who transported firearms in locked cases or safes during routine travel were largely protected under both federal and state laws. Under the new ruling, officers may argue reasonable suspicion or safety concerns in ways that could justify temporary inspection or questioning. While this doesn't eliminate your rights, it significantly increases the need for clear documentation and adherence to best practices. Experts suggest keeping written records of storage methods, locations, and any travel-related firearm activity. These precautions may not be legally required, but they could prove critical in defending your rights if a dispute arises. The Supreme Court also indirectly addressed home security protocols. Certain clauses imply that officers may have discretion to evaluate security measures, such as alarms, locks, or safes, under the context of threat assessment. This is subtle, but it means that even responsible gun owners with fully legal security measures could be questioned in ways that previously seemed unnecessary. Again, this isn't an invitation to panic, but it is a warning that staying informed, vigilant, and prepared is now an essential part of lawful firearm ownership. Legal experts have emphasized that one of the most overlooked aspects of this ruling is the psychological effect. Gun owners who assume that their actions are automatically protected may find themselves surprised by increased scrutiny. This ruling doesn't create a new law, but it changes how existing laws are interpreted, which can feel like the law itself has changed overnight. For law-abiding citizens, this shift creates an urgent need for education, preparation, and adaptation to ensure that their rights are exercised safely and legally. Many law enforcement agencies are already distributing internal memos and guidelines in response to the ruling. These documents often expand officer discretion, clarify new search criteria, or reinterpret existing rules about firearm possession and storage. While intended to standardize practices, they also create new risks for ordinary citizens who are unaware of how these guidelines are applied in real situations. The combination of Supreme Court precedent and evolving law enforcement protocols makes staying informed not optional, but critical. Experts recommend a multi-step approach for gun owners. First, review all firearm documentation, including purchase records, permits, and registration details. Second, evaluate storage and transportation practices to ensure they are consistent with both state and federal laws. Third, consult a legal expert familiar with both 2A and 4A implications of the Supreme Court ruling. Fourth, stay updated on state-specific responses, as these will dictate how law enforcement applies the ruling locally. Following these steps can minimize risk and ensure that you are prepared for any scenario. Perhaps most importantly, gun owners must change the way they think about rights and responsibilities. Owning a firearm isn't just about possession. It's about understanding how your rights interact with law enforcement, the courts, and evolving legal interpretations. This ruling underscores that knowledge, preparation, and vigilance are as important as the firearms themselves. Failing to adapt could result in consequences ranging from fines to temporary confiscation or legal entanglements, even if no laws were intentionally broken.